Hi, it's great to be back. Welcome to United MUFON. We've got a great meeting planned tonight with a whole lot to cover. So let's get a little overview of what we expect for tonight. So I got a lot of notes here too. But firstly, we're going to learn a little more about the MUFON organization, what we do and how we do those things. And we'll discuss what's new and what to keep an eye out for in the future. We're going to go over some UFO sighting stats that have been reported to MUFON for the month of October. And then we have a special guest with us tonight. I'm so excited about him being with us, and his name is Richard Beckwith. He is the MUFON podcast founder, and he's a speaker and an author, and he's on the board of directors with me. But we'll talk to him in a little bit, okay? And tonight I'll share a personal experience like I did last time from a UFO sighting that I had with my husband, Kevin, back last year. And we'll leave some time for some question and answers at the end in a round table tonight. So you can ask Richard questions or you can talk to me if you'd like. But we've got a full plate tonight. So let's get started. So here we go. Also, please keep your mics muted because we are live. Okay. And so what is MUFON? Well, MUFON is an all-volunteer nonprofit 501c3 charitable corporation and the world's oldest and largest civilian UFO investigation and research organization. Whether you have UFO reports to share, or you're an armchair UFO investigator, or you want to train and join our investigation team, MUFON is here for you. Won't you please join us in our quest to discover the truth? So, we are the largest and oldest UFO investigative organization in the world, with a huge member base adding to it daily. And we're represented in all 50 states and 40 countries, with thousands of trained volunteer field investigators who are certified. Over 50 PhD consultants in most disciplines. So truly, MUFON conducts scientific investigations of the UFO phenomenon, while others are just reporting agencies. So that's interesting. So how we investigate? Well, a little bit about that is we use a scientific method here at MUFON. We use computer science, biology, astronomy, physics, chemistry, geology, engineering, and statistics. And every single certified field investigator uses this process. So our mission statement, if you hadn't heard it yet, I mean, I know I shared it last time, but we truly are the investigative, I want to say, like, gold standard for UFO investigating. And we're the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. We investigate the UFO sightings, abductions, and entity cases, and promote research on UFOs with an eye toward science all the time. And we educate the public on the UFO phenomenon. Now, doing this requires so much hard work. And I just always want to remind people watching, we are a volunteer organization. So our board of directors, and I'd like to just talk a little bit about that. Our board, we're going to start highlighting on a monthly basis now, each person. This time we will put the spotlight on our member, Richard Beckwith, but we'll dig a little deeper into each of our board members so that you get to know us a little more personally, and just a little bit better. So for this month, like I said, we're going to spotlight Richard Beckwith because he's here with us. So that's so great. And he is a practicing attorney for more than 22 years and possesses a Juris Doctorate from the University of Wyoming, the College of Law. And he's a Bachelor of Science degree in molecular biology from the University of Wyoming. And Richard published his first novel in 2016, so he's also an author. And he presently serves as city attorney for the city of Rock Springs, Wyoming. He's also a MUFON benefactor and also the founder and creator of the MUFON podcast. And if you haven't watched that, you just absolutely have to. It's wonderful. He does an excellent job. We'll find out a little bit more about that later. So some fun facts that we have on our in MUFON is we were established in 1969, and for the past 51 years, MUFON has compiled a database of over 15,000 UFO reports. And in 2006, MUFON developed the CMS case management system, which we all use here. And as MUFON has evolved, we now monitor abductions and entity cases. And of all the UFOs that are out there, actually only about 15% are real. I shouldn't have said all the UFOs that are out there. What I meant to say is of all the UFOs reported out there, about 15% are the real deal. The others are simply misidentifications. Some are optical illusions, stars, planets, hoaxes, hallucinations, or just folks who really don't know what they're looking for. And so reports are made, it can be Chinese lanterns or something like that that's easily explainable. But what about those remaining 15%? And that's really the reason and the whole purpose behind MUFON. And we do want to hear your story. You're not alone, and no experience is ever going to be too bizarre to report. Just go to MUFON.com and report anything that's happened to you, even if it's like when you were 15 or 16 and you're 60 now or something. It really doesn't matter because our database is huge. We've been doing this since 1969, and we may be able to connect the same craft or experience that you've had with something that has happened with someone else. And we've got an experiencer research team known as the ERT to those of us here in MUFON. And Kathleen Martin is the director. And if you need to or want to, you can take the first step towards understanding what's happened to you by completing a short experiencer questionnaire. And you see that www.mufon.com/experiencer-questionnaire at Hotmail. By doing so, you can confidently share your experience with someone who can help you to find answers. Kathleen works with many, many talented and exceptional MUFON officers, and they are all here to help you if you need them. So if you have something to report and it's bothering you, well, again, that's why we're here. That's how I ended up coming here. So feel free to contact us on MUFON.com. A little MUFON business. We're looking at Project Aquarius, and I do want to talk about that. Other than joining MUFON, and I will get right to that, but Project Aquarius is a little business that's going on right now within MUFON, and we're looking for people who may want to donate to this project because it has been in the making for over 45 years. So what is Project Aquarius, you're probably wondering? Well, the concept goes back as far as 1975, when the idea of a global accessible UFO database was first discussed. So that was the beginning of Project Aquarius. Yeah, that was a while back, 75. And in 2013, we now had the technology to make it happen. However, it didn't happen. And finally, in 2019, the MUFON board approved Project Aquarius, and it is the reaching out to other organizations to join with us in the development of the largest repository of translatable, accessible UFO data, literally in the world. So we've been working hard on bringing this all to be, and we're proud of it. And we are now at the point of digitizing and assimilating the files of CUFO and NICAP, which, when combined with the Pandora files and the Stringfield data, will constitute the most amazing assembly of researchable UFO data ever developed. And in other parts of the world, notably our friends in Europe and South America, vast amounts of data exist. And we'll be reaching out to those organizations and inviting them to join with us in this worldwide effort to develop the most comprehensive collection of UFO data on the planet. There's a myriad of projects on the agenda, and it will take an immense effort to put them all into practice. And I must tell you that none of it would be possible without all of you, our members, our state directors, our state officers, our certified field investigators, our staff, and supporters. It's because of you that we're literally here, you loyal observers of the greatest phenomenon for the benefit of humanity. And I want to thank you, deeply thank you from all of us here at MUFON. Please donate to Project Aquarius via www.mufon.com if you can. We'd love to hear from you. So if you haven't joined MUFON, I'd love to invite you to join MUFON because there's so much going on. We have in our journal, which you can either get an electronic or hard copy of, they include articles by leading ufologists, the latest information on UFO sighting reports, abduction cases, and mutilations and crop circles, just to name a few. So many multiple different types of reports and one-on-ones and interviews and different things like that. The states also report specific, and it's a beautiful journal. It has been updated, and all of that is for literally $59.88 for a whole year. So if you can, and we'd love for you to, please log on to MUFON.com. We also have, which you can add to your MUFON membership if you'd like to, we have it's called MUFON TV. We've had this now for about a couple of years, and people love it. So all you do is upgrade. It's only $119.88 for the whole year. That includes everything. And it's $9.99 a month. We're actually doing a monthly amount. So this includes live streams to the MUFON Symposium. And if you figure joining MUFON, I mean, if you look at what you would spend with airfare, hotels, eating, and renting a car, transportation to go to a live symposium, we do everything through live stream. So hopefully we'll be able to have our next one and you can make it. But if you can't, for literally $119.88 for the whole year, you get that live stream plus your journal. I mean, it's an amazing deal. I can't imagine somebody, not doing it. And if you've got something to report to us, I would hope that you would just report your experience to MUFON.com as well. So our 51st annual symposium is coming up. It's going to be July the 23rd through the 25th of 2021. Fingers crossed, okay, because we're hoping we don't have any issues with COVID. We're hoping everything is going to go spectacularly, and we'll have it there. So it will be also, like I said, live streamed if you can't make it. The registration will open on February the 21st, and we're hoping to be in Las Vegas, Nevada. That's where we were hoping in 2020, but we did have to cancel. So hope you can make it. I know I'm going to be there if we can do this. So we're hoping we can. And if you are considering joining us to become an investigator, I would like to invite you to do so. simply for that $59. You join, you become a member, and then there is another fee to actually become a certified field investigator, where we train you and walk you through the process of learning how to uh, work through reports that come into our CMS. And you know that we're the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. I can honestly tell you it will change your life to become a MUFON field investigator, just because of the people you meet, the situations that you are involved in, and places that you go. It's wonderful. I can't say enough about it. It changed my life. I'm really glad I did that. We also have a MUFON online store, and we have some wonderful neck gaiters that are not on there, but they are just absolutely beautiful, and they're only $15. And you can see we've got shirts and other things, but these neck gaiters are great, especially with winter coming. They keep your neck warm, and it's a mask. I ordered mine last night. I can't wait for it to get here because, you know, I live in Tennessee and it gets really cold up here. So I'm happy to have that neck gaiter on, and it's got that big UFO and MUFON on there. So I'm excited about that. Anyway, our next meeting for our United MUFON will be on December the 19th at 8 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. Central. And so you'll log in just like you did here. I hope you can make that. And we'll have another person that will be interviewing. It will be Tom Whitmore. He's a board member as well. And we'll talk more about that. I'll post some things online. He's very interesting. Talks mainly about the MJ12, and it's just amazing stuff, amazing stuff. So let's go into our stats. There are MUFON sighting statistics, and I don't know who out there is a member and already has a journal, but if you don't, our October stats are, my husband does such an amazing job of putting all these together for me. I thank him. Just looks great. For October is a total of 414 UFO sighting reports to the Mutual UFO Network and from around the world. So in the United States alone, we had 340, you can see there. And Canada reported 34, but I know they've had many more than that. The United Kingdom is very active, but we've got 19 reported. And you can read the rest of them there yourself as I've got them on the screen. Lots of work to do with some of the other countries across the waters, but people are reporting, so it's wonderful. And also our reports within the United States, we break that down so you can see your state and how many sighting reports. Look at the difference between some of the states. Some will have 1, some will have 56. It's amazing. California and Texas are usually number ones and number two. And this time it's California, New York, Texas, and Pennsylvania leading. And then look for your own state and see how many have been reported where you are. The shape of the object is also something that we notice on the CMS. And as you can see here, the circle is by far usually the most popular scene, and the sphere is right under it as a rule. So the unknowns, 34, star-like, 34, disk, 34, and I'll let you read all of those. And then we also have reports of what is seen at different distances from the people. And it looks like it's 100 feet to 37, 37 under 100 feet. Over 100 feet was 48. And then take it from there and you can see. So everything is kind of assimilated so that you can see exactly what happened, what type, and how far it was from the person. And every now and then we have the sighting reports on entities that are actually sighted. So today I'm going to share, like I had said, a personal witness testimony. And one of the reasons that I wanted to share this was because it just happened to me last year. And so it's kind of new on my plate. Hi. And so it was April of 2019, and I was living in Florida with my husband, Kevin, and we had just gotten home from a trip that we had been on, and we were kind of worn out, and we went out and we're sitting on the pool deck in the backyard. And I think I need to click this for the pool deck. There you go. That is actually exactly where we were. That's our pool deck. And in the back of the house in Florida, and discussing all that had gone on over the week. Well, I was facing Kevin in a lounge chair facing north, and he was sitting in a lounge chair actually facing south. And I was talking to him and going on and on when he sat straight up in his lounge chair and screamed, "Hey, did you see that flash of white light?" And he said, "Over there, look over there, over the tree line." And I turned to look at what he was pointing at, and I said, "I didn't see anything." But he said, "My God, Terry, I think I just saw a very fast moving UFO, my very first UFO like that." And I said, "Oh, wow. I wish I would have seen it. Too bad I missed that." But as I looked at where he was pointing, I honestly could see nothing. So I really felt bad. And as you can see, we have that lanai screen, and you can see straight through it like it wasn't even there. It's almost like it's a window. But so we both just stared out into the south sky for about 10 minutes. And I turned my chair so that I was now facing south with him, which is exactly what you're looking at there. That lanai is facing south. And where he saw that white flash was just over those trees in the back there. And it was incredibly bright. And that's what just freaked him out. And so we both just were looking back out there and kind of talking again. We got back to talking about what we were originally talking about. And then maybe 5 minutes went by. And as I was looking up and talking, I screamed out loud to him. And by the way, it had gotten darker. It was getting a little bit darker. I had screamed up to him, oh my God, look at that." And as the both of us were just standing there, we were dumbfounded, really. I mean, it was amazing to see something like that. And it was so beautiful. This thing was circulating so fast. It was just spinning really quickly, but it went by like 1, 2, 3, 4, and boom, it was gone. We knew it wasn't anything from Lakeland Linder or from Tampa International or from even the Orlando Metro Airport, because Lakeland is kind of in the middle of all that. You've got Tampa, then St. Pete Airport down there, and then you've got Orlando and Melbourne even farther over. And we knew it wasn't anything like that. And even the Space Coast is just beyond that. We were kind of right in the center of the state in that line. But this thing was unbelievable. It was absolutely beautiful. And so I'm going to say it was about 500 feet above our lanai, and the colors were beautiful. I had never seen anything like that. It was just literally magical. And it was, the way it was spinning was so fast. It's like you saw this constant color, but it was whipping in different colors, like the colors that were on that little, rendition there. So we were stunned, to say the least, but also elated that we got to see that together. And we watched it take off, and it did head to the west. So to the east towards Melbourne and the Space Coast. So it was going over us. So, of course, I got right up and called Lakeland Linder and asked if they had found anything in the sky, if anything had been seen or reported. And they said no. But that's really, that's what they do. Very often, they aren't going to tell you if something was actually seen. So I thank them and called the police department and to see if anything had been reported, and nothing had been reported, that they were going to tell me about anyway. So we shared what had happened with our local MUFON field investigators, and a great investigation pursued. Although we couldn't find anybody that would agree that it was there. So we know what we saw, and we sure were happy that we were able to see it. So anyway, let's move right along. So today, or I should actually say tonight, our presentation topic is going to be Richard Beckwith. And so I'm going to bring him in just a minute, but today's presentation with him, I just want to recap that he's a 22-year attorney in Rock Springs, Wyoming. And he's an entertaining and intellectual friend and colleague of mine on the board of directors, as well as a speaker and author and a podcast founder and director of the MUFON podcast. He's a molecular biologist and a MUFON benefactor. Please join me in welcoming Richard to the United MUFON meeting tonight. Hi there, Rich.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you.
Kevin.
I appreciate that. Just a couple of things,
you hear
Terry.
Me, Rich?
I'm actually.
Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Okay. I just needed to be turned up, I guess. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you here.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to let you take over and you can share with our guests.
Whatever I want.
Yeah, whatever you want.
Well, a couple of things. First, I guess, first off, I'm actually in my 27th year of practicing law.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's been, no, that's okay. That's not a big deal. 22, 27, you start to lose track after a while. So I've been practicing law for 27 years. Before I was a lawyer, I did all kinds of things. When I was in high school, I worked in radio. I got a job at the local radio station when I was 16 years old, and I started doing part-time weekend stuff, DJing on the weekend for a local radio station in Rock Springs. And after high school, they made me the news director because the news director quit and they needed a guy to do it, and I was there. So they made me the news director, and it became a full-time position. And I went, and one of the first things that I did as the news director, I've always had an interest in UFOs, beginning with my father, who told me about a crash of a flying saucer in the desert in New Mexico when I was a little kid. And I didn't believe him. Well, part of me did, but Dad was always kind of messing with me, as he still does. He's over in the house right now. I'm out in the trailer, out on the ranch right now. But he told me about this crash of this flying saucer. And so I thought he was kind of messing with me. My dad likes to do that. So I went to the library, like a lot of kids did back in the day, and started reading books on the subject. And I read everything that I could find on the subject and found out that, wow, gosh, there really was something to UFOs. So when I became a news director at the radio station, one of the first things I did was a week-long special on UFOs. And this would have been back in 1979 or 80 when I did this. And so what I did was I got to know a guy by the name of Leo Sprinkle, with whom some of you may be familiar. Dr. Sprinkle is one of the first folks that studied the abduction phenomenon, along with John Mack and some of those other folks. So I got to know Leo Sprinkle, and we're still friends now. Leo's quite a bit older now, of course, but so I got to know Leo Sprinkle, and I went down to the University of Wyoming and got to sit in on a regressive hypnosis session with Dr. Sprinkle and a guy by the name of Pat McGuire. Pat McGuire was a rancher from a little town called Bosler, Wyoming, and he owned a piece of land that was just a dry piece of dirt, nothing on it. And he had this vision. He had been told, he said he had been told by aliens, little gray aliens, that there was water underneath this land, and he needed to dig a well and tap into this water. And no one believed him. And so he had, as a matter of fact, he got geology reports and hydrology reports, and all the hydrologists and engineers all told him, "You're nuts. Don't even try. You're sitting on a rock. You're not going to find any water." Well, he was insistent that these aliens had told him to dig this well. So he went and bought an old Sherman tank, and he took the
Wow.
motor out of this old Sherman tank, and he dug a well. And as it turns out, he tapped into an offshoot of the Ogallala Aquifer, and this thing was pumping, and still to this day, it has access to this offshoot of the Ogallala Aquifer, and it just pumps thousands of gallons of water a minute. It's a huge reservoir of water right underneath there. And so he turned this area of the desert into an oasis, essentially, with this water that he had tapped into as the result of being told to do so by the aliens. Now, I'm not saying he was told to do that by
That's
the aliens,
amazing.
but it certainly seems like a coincidence. So
Yeah.
what I started doing after that was I started attending the yearly conferences that Dr. Sprinkle was having at the University of Wyoming. He called them the Contactee conferences, and Dr. Greer was going to those conferences way back in the day. And so I went off and became a musician, and I did that for a little while. Then I went back to school after leaving radio and doing all that stuff. And I was a musician, and I made a living at it until about 1986. And then I went back to school and got my initially majored in physics, and then turned to biology. I realized I had a real interest in biology. So I started working in different labs. As I was working on my degree, I worked in a molecular virology lab. I worked in a molecular genetics lab for a while, about a year. Worked in an atmospheric bacteriology lab, and a molecular, well, I guess I already mentioned the molecular virology lab, but so finished my degree in molecular biology and went to school to get a law degree. And I thought I might be a patent attorney, patenting organisms and that sort of thing, and determined
That's
that wasn't
amazing, Richard.
what I wanted to do. Yeah, so I decided what I wanted to do was actually just be a regular old everyday trial lawyer. But I came back to my hometown and immediately joined MUFON again. I actually joined MUFON the first time way back in when it was after it was first it wasn't the Mutual UFO Network. It was the I can't remember what it was called before, but anyway, I joined early on, and then joined again when I graduated from law school. And at that time, started having conversations with some of the folks on the board. I started after that giving, legal advice here and there to various executive directors as they, like with John Schuessler, who's now a fellow board member, and James Carrion for a brief time, and Clifford Cliff, and of course Dave McDonald and Jan Harzan. And so when Jan Harzan became the executive director, I think I think it was Kathleen Martin and a couple other folks recommended me as having a board position. In the interim period, while I was doing all this stuff, I hooked up with Dr. Stephen Greer, and I provided legal counsel to Dr. Greer's Orion project and to Dr. Greer for about 3 years. And this would have been coincidental with his movie, The Sirius Project. I actually formed that corporation. I helped him form the Sirius Corporation. And I worked for him for 3 years. And I was actually the lawyer that drew up the contracts to obtain the Stan Meyer technology that he talks about in that movie.
Yeah.
And that just to refresh everybody's recollection, Stan Meyer was a guy that claimed to have built a motor and engine and developed a technology that he could basically run motors on water.
Yeah.
He had developed some kind of a really efficient hydrolysis process, purportedly. And I can tell you that everything that was in the movie was true, that we actually, had a guy, and we had our engineers down at the location where the Stan Meyer stuff was stored. they had told us that there were still things there of some interest, and so we had a pretty good chunk of money to give to them. But then somebody came in, all of a sudden nobody was returning my phone calls, and nobody was returning Dr. Greer's phone calls, and somebody came in and took that technology. Somebody with a lot more money than we had, and we had a pretty good chunk that we could give them if we found that we had something that was of interest to us. So I also got to know a guy by the name of Dr. Stanislav Ojak. I was just talking to Terry about this guy before.
Yeah.
I have done lectures over the years on various subjects, like on the reality of the UFO phenomenon and generally, and on in particular the law of government secrecy. I do a lecture on the law of government secrecy and the need to know, and how the intelligence community uses the law to keep things secret. There are actually rules around secrecy and who gets to know things, and as we all know, that's a need to know. But I was doing these lectures, and Dr. Ojak showed up at one of my lectures, and we immediately became friends. He became a mentor of mine. Now, Dr. Ojak, I had him on my show about 2 weeks ago on the MUFON podcast, and Dr. Ojak is probably the most not famous but most prolific UFO researcher in the world. He knows everybody. He knew Dr. Greer. They actually are members of the Baha'i faith. Dr. Greer is a member of the Baha'i faith,
Yeah.
and so Stanislav. Now, I am not religious myself, and don't adhere to things of that nature necessarily, but so as it turns out, Dr. Ojak knew some other people that I found very interesting, like a guy named Stan Romanek, and it turns out that Stanislav was Stan Romanek's clinical psychologist, and he was also really good friends with Dr. Sprinkle, which I didn't know. And so you see kind of these little threads that all kind of come together. And then Dr. Ojak and I and Dr. Sprinkle and a few other folks, Stan Romanek, Barbara Lamb, you may be familiar with her. She just wrote a book called Hybrids.
Yes.
And so Barbara's a dear friend of mine. And we formed a little group called the Institute for Human Cosmic Interaction. And that was with another gal by the name of Carol Drool. And this was just a small, by invitation only group. We didn't really have a website or anything like that. We had several conferences. And Dr. Ojak, as it turns out, had been, he's still a dear friend of mine. And he just blows me away with the kinds of things that he does. But Dr. Ojak had been close friends with Ingo Swann.
Yeah.
Some of you may be familiar with something called remote viewing. Ingo Swann was probably one of the most prolific remote viewers of all time, highly psychic. He was with Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff at the Stanford Research Institute, and that's where they did the first psi experiments that led to the development of the CIA's remote viewing program. And so Dr. Ojak played a significant role in that, and so I felt very lucky to not only get to know him, but to become really good, close friends with him. And I would actually consider him a mentor. He has some incredible abilities that I have yet to fathom. One of the things that he does is one of the things that he does is he takes photographs of things with a camera that has the lens cap on. And you would think, well, you wouldn't get any pictures if you have the lens cap on. Well, actually, Dr. Ojak does. And he's got thousands of these photographs that he takes with the lens cap on. Now, he gets pictures not only of what he's taking, but of something else, almost as though what he's taking pictures of is also a picture of some other reality. I don't know how else
Like
to
an
explain it.
ethereal.
And this is very ethereal sort of images, and all these photographs, thousands of them, and he does it all the time, and they've been studied very closely. I have another good friend of mine named Claude Swanson, who has written some books that you may be familiar with. Basically, he writes on a new kind of physics, and he's written several books. He's been a guest on Coast to Coast many times, but if you ever get a chance to read Claude Swanson's books, do so. He's an MIT experimental physicist, and he and some other folks got together, including, Paul Davids has seen this too. He's the guy I had on last week. He's also a good friend of Dr. Ojak's, and they studied. They actually did experiments on Dr. Ojak, and they did it under laboratory conditions such that what they would do is they would give him a camera, and they would seal the camera so that Dr. Ojak can't tamper with it, and put the lens cap on, and then he would have another camera that didn't have the lens cap on, and then he would take pictures with, so he's got an MIT physicist that is okay. I'm going to seal this camera. He seals the camera for Stanislav, so Stanislav can't tamper with it, and then he gives him another camera as a control camera, and then Stanislav goes around and takes pictures with both cameras, with the regular lens and with the
That's
capped
amazing.
lens, and so they look at these, and like I said, he's got thousands of these images, and so they go back and they get back to the laboratory, and they did this more than once. This was easily repeatable. He did it over and over and over again, and they would take these images, they develop the film in the laboratory, unseal the camera, and then they would go into the camera, and they would find that he would actually get images like of people that I'm actually in one of these pictures, and what he would do is, he would when they opened up the pictures, they opened up and developed the film, they would see that it was almost like a plasma on the film that went from frame to frame. So it wasn't something that was coming in through the lens. It wasn't some form of light like photons or something like that was causing these images, but nonetheless the film is reacting, and it's leaving images of whatever he's taking a picture of, but there's pictures of this, like I said, like this plasma, it seems like it. And so the conclusion that the physicists came to was that Stanislav himself was somehow affecting the film somehow, using his own psychic abilities. So I really got to know Dr. Ojak very well over the years, and he is still, as I said, a good friend of mine, as is Dr. Sprinkle. And then I think at some point along the line, after advising all of the quite a few of the executive directors at MUFON, they recommended me for a board position, and I became a member of the board of MUFON, and so I've been doing that now for I think this is my first term, so I've been doing it for a couple of years, but I've been involved in, I guess, the mechanism of MUFON for quite some time. So that's kind of my background, and I guess my UFO street cred. I've just always been kind of a fly on the wall for a lot of this stuff, and I'm not really much of a self promoter. I really believe in MUFON. I think it's an excellent organization. I've been proud to be part of it from the beginning, I think that we've got a huge mass of data that all kinds of things can be done with it in terms of determining various aspects of the UFO phenomenon. A lot of that takes money, though, and so as a volunteer organization, and of course none of us get paid. And just so everybody knows, they don't tell us any secrets. Now, well, I mean, we have heard. I mean, sometimes folks come to us. I don't want to say we've heard secrets, but Lou Elizondo came to us, and we got to know Lou pretty good, and I got to know Lou pretty good. And he did tell us a few things that we found very interesting. Nothing, I don't think, that isn't at
It's
least maybe
already
not
all out
generally
there.
known publicly. Yeah, most of it's out there. Not all of it, but we don't really know anything that anybody else. We don't have pieces of flying saucers, and on the MUFON board, we're a business board, so
Yeah.
we're not. We MJ12, we are not. you know,
Yeah, that's the truth.
yeah, we just we just run the business of MUFON, and literally nothing that we do deals with UFOs. Really, it's just more about discussing potential contracts, things of that nature. It
Right.
really doesn't have anything to do with flying saucers. So, the stuff that I do with flying saucers, that's the interesting part. And the MUFON podcast, of course, it's near and dear to me because I was in broadcasting for so many years, and I'm sort of drawing on these relationships that I've developed, from the early '80s to get people to appear and so forth, and people are becoming more and more open to appearing on the podcast, and it's getting to be a little bit more popular, but we're still just in the midst of a few episodes, and I had to stop there for a little while because we were just having some difficulties with getting our YouTube all in the same tube and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're back on track now. So
So how many have
I
you
think
done
that's
so far? How long have you been doing the podcast?
well. I started as you well. This is how the podcast started, as you may recall. It was actually, I think, it was sort of thought about at the same meeting where we had a briefing from Lou Elizondo, and
Right.
somebody said, "Well, we need to have a podcast." And I said, "I'll do it," because I thought, well, I'd been in broadcasting so many years, and it was something I was interested. So I basically, like everything else, I just sort of volunteered myself into it, and then I did a few episodes, and then I was asked to stop for a period of time just after I'd done a few episodes because of some
Has
channeling
it been
issues
about
and
a
so forth.
year?
Yeah, it's been over a year since we started it, but I just
Oh,
started up episodes again here about 4 or 5 weeks ago.
well, you do an amazing job, and you've had some very interesting people on, and I can't say enough positive
Yeah,
about it. I think it's great what you're doing, and
I
so much
appreciate it.
information getting out there. And that's what we need. People want to hear what's happening, what's, the real nuts and bolts of things. And you do a great job with that.
I appreciate that.
So, what else would you like to chat with us about?
Well, whatever if anybody has any questions about, I think I've thrown a few things out there.
A
Sometimes
few.
folks are interested in what I've done with Dr. Greer. I can tell you a couple of things that some conclusions that I've come to about the UFO phenomena, some things that I've learned over the years that I think might be helpful to folks that might be perhaps somewhat new or maybe just even tacitly interested in the UFO subject. I think the first thing is my first thought when I got into this when I was just a kid was that, well, there are these little guys and they get in these things like cars, they're little UFOs and they come from another planet, from somewhere else. And I mean, early on we heard it was Zeta Reticuli, and I think there's some evidence to bear out that there may be somebody coming from that particular star system, and that it may be that that certain elements were formed there because of the nature of the star system and gravitational forces and so forth that led to the early development of space flight. Zeta Reticuli is a binary star system, but the distance between the two stars in that system is only 0.8 light years. So they have if there are any and the neat thing is that they're not really any planets that might be revolving around any of the other star won't really, they don't really affect each other, but that star is just right over there. It's just 0.8 light years away. And
Yeah.
so I think Zeta Reticuli is probably a good location for folks to be coming from. But the UFO phenomenon is not just that.
No.
The longer I've gone through this, the more I've come to realize that it's not just little guys getting and little guys and gals or whatever getting in little spaceships and coming from somewhere else. This is a we live in a multiverse.
Yes.
We don't live in just a 3 or 4 dimensional you know universe. We live in a multiverse, and I think that there's evidence to suggest that this multiverse um, gives rise to these other universes that are just adjacent to ours. And I think that there are folks out there that have figured out how to traverse those universes from, to step from one universe into another. I mean, you can call it phasing if you want. I
Yeah.
think that's part of it, that there are these higher dimensions.
Yeah, it's definitely
or
happening.
different, and not really. I don't want to say necessarily dimensions, but like my guest, Dr. Simeon Hine, talks about this, and one of the reasons I had him on my podcast was because of something that he calls many interacting worlds, which is related to quantum wave function collapse and the notion of the multiverse. And so what we're talking about here is that for every quantum event, an entirely new reality arises. And so, and what I mean by that, for every little subatomic particle movement, there is simultaneous, and everywhere in the universe, there is simultaneously created a reality from that. Now, if you guys might remember Schrodinger's cat, and this is where quantum wave function collapse comes into. And so in quantum physics, a cat in this particular experiment can be both alive and dead at the same time. Basically,
yeah, I saw that. Yeah, interesting.
Well, in the Schrodinger's cat sort of paradigm, and what I'm talking about again is this quantum wave function collapse. If you have a box with a cat inside of it, and there is also simultaneously a radioactive source is placed inside this sealed box, and if an internal monitor detects radioactivity and the flask is shattered, it releases poison that kills the cat. And quantum mechanics implies that after a while, the cat can be both alive and dead at the same time. And so you don't know whether it's alive or dead. And it can be, in fact, alive and dead at the same time until you open the box and observe it. And then you see, as you observe it, that the cat is either alive or dead. And so the wave function collapses at that point. So in other words, the cat is both alive and dead in the quantum world, okay? But by observation, you collapse the wave, and it right. I'll say, okay, so now multiple interacting worlds, that theory says, well, wait a second, maybe the wave only collapses, the function of the wave collapses only in the universe that's being observed, but in fact, the other possibilities don't collapse. In classical physics, or in classical quantum physics, all of the possibilities collapse into one wave function, or the one way, but and the other realities, it's just assumed that they go away. But that's not what happens in multiple interacting worlds. The other universes, the other possibilities can continue in another reality, so that in this universe you observe that the cat is dead, but in the adjacent universe the cat is alive. You see what I'm getting at?
Yes.
But you can think of the cat itself.
The cat
itself is it's every quantum event. And so there are these beings, and probably even people that are actually, they're us. There's another person named Terry Ling, and that Terry Ling Keel, and that person exists in many different realities. But the further away that you get in the pages of this book, the further away you get from the reality that we know, such that the further and further away that you get from the collapse of that particular wave, those particular wave functions, it's actually related to quantum entanglement. And quantum entanglement what that is that that means that particles are connected in some extra dimensional way. This started with Einstein's spooky action at a distance. One thing that happened when Einstein was going through his equations, he was finding that particles on the other side of the universe would react to something that was happening in this part of the universe, and he couldn't he couldn't resolve that, and so he called it spooky action at a distance. And what he said was it just had to do with some local variables that and so he had a very deterministic view of the universe. It was just it was a little bit more than coincident, but there was no extra dimensional connection between these particles. And then a guy named Bohm came along, and he developed what he called Bohm's theorem. And basically what he said was that all these that particles are actually connected, that there actually is this extra dimensional connection, and they call it Bohm's theorem. And so a guy came along named Elaine Aspect, and he developed an experiment to determine whether or not there was an extra dimensional connection between these particles, or whether there was just sort of coincidence that these particles would somehow, simultaneously coincide their spins at a distance. And I guess I'm getting a little bit beyond myself here, but
a little beyond me.
Elaine, oh, I'm sorry about that. What Elaine Aspect found out was, when he did this experiment, what he did was he theorized was that and he experimented with paired photons, and he said to himself, okay, now if there's an extra dimensional connection between these photons, I can measure the spins when they're simultaneously sent to different locations, and if there's a connection between them, the spins will correlate. But if there is no extra dimensional connection, then there wouldn't be any sort of a significant, statistically significant correlation between the spins of the photons. So what he was doing was sending a laser beam through some mercury vapor, and then sending off paired photons off of this mercury vapor, and then he was measuring them in these detectors that were separated from each other. And what he found out was, in this experiment, and it's completely repeatable, was that there was a high correlation between the spins of these paired photons, no matter how far away they were, And so what that meant was he was actually able to prove that there was a connection, some sort of an extra dimensional, multidimensional connection between these paired photons, which when you extrapolate, you begin to realize that every particle in the universe is connected to every other particle in the universe. You see where I'm going with this?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I happen to believe that.
Yeah. So everything is connected. We're all everything, and our physical beings, really, we live in a holographic universe, more or less, in a holographic reality. And what we are, if you listen to Dr. Michio Kaku, is that we're like music. We're vibrations on a string. Yeah. And so what's happening here is that if you see let's say if you throw a pebble into a pond, it sends out this ripple, right? Well, if you throw another pebble into the pond, then you get what they call an interference pattern, where the ripple from the one pebble is interacting with the ripple from the other pebble, uniting. And right, and then that is our reality. We are actually the interference patterns of these pebbles being tossed into the pond. You see what I'm getting at? We're interference patterns in this holographic reality, and it all centers around consciousness. And I realize I'm going off the deep end here, but
well, there might be some people out there that want to ask you some questions.
Sure. I started off with this idea that there are these little guys coming from planets somewhere and have ended up here, where
that's okay.
It's not just that. All these things are all related, like UFOs and ghosts, and psychic phenomenon, and ESP and remote viewing. It's all part of the same thing. We're all part of this.
They are. We're all part of this
all
related.
yeah, we're all part of this matrix, if you will. I don't want to call
Uh-huh.
it a matrix because I don't see it as some sort of like an insidious sort of a evil thing. I don't think we're necessarily a part of some kind of an experiment. But our reality it really is that we live in this we live in this foam. This, and we're basically the result of the interaction of these interference patterns. Uh,
Very
See what
interesting.
I'm getting at?
You're
So,
amazing. Is there anybody out there that does want to ask some questions? I did have one question come up on how often does your podcast occur, but if you want to just give some information on how to get to your podcast, and then let's open the
sure,
lines for people to talk to you at a question and answer.
sure. Well, it's on Sunday nights. I'm taking 2 weekends off right now because next weekend's Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
and I had this thing
Yeah.
going on this weekend, and so
Thanksgiving.
we're going to be off for a couple weeks. We'll be back the weekend after Thanksgiving. It's on Sunday nights. We're on the official MUFON YouTube channel. And so the program, the video part of the program streams on Sunday nights at 9 o'clock Western time, Mountain Standard Time, and 8 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Central, or 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern Time. And you can also stream them on Spreaker, Amazon Music, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all the places where they have podcasts are simultaneously uh,
That's great.
broadcast on those. So you can,
Yay.
Sunday nights. And I've got some pretty good guests coming up, and I've learned a lot of other things too that I'd love to talk about, but I'm sure we don't have time for all that stuff. But I'd be happy to talk to anybody if they have any
Sure, sure.
questions or
And Kevin, you
about the
can let me
board
know
or
how we do that. Bring the people in that have questions at this point to ask.
They should be able to unmute themselves.
Oh, they can unmute themselves? Okay. But be careful if somebody else unmuted too. All right.
Well, clearly I've talked it up. Good night, everybody. Looked like Mark Easter had a question.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I do have a question. It's actually for Terry. I had,
Oh, okay.
I had attended the first meeting last month, and I had some questions, and I was going to ask you, but there was a problem with the audio where we couldn't
Oh,
ask
right,
questions. And so I just want to practice a little bit of a field investigation, if that's okay with you. It's all about asking questions, so I've been hanging on to this since last month.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot has happened since last month. So I might not remember everything, but you had laid out in detail the sightings that you had starting with your first sightings. And I can't remember the state. What was the state that was in?
Florida.
Yeah. And you were working for a specific company. Was it Honeywell?
I had worked for Honeywell, and I was on what they call their layoff period. We were working on a Minuteman project, and
Yeah,
they
and
laid people off. Yeah.
that was where, and your mother had worked there as well for
My mother
Honeywell.
retired from there. Yeah, she was in
Yeah.
management.
And that's where it's always where my investigations lead to, and I don't lead witnesses. That's not what I'm saying. Is I just want to know why they show up where they show up. And so you just answered the question for me. Is it now? Do you have an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement? Because I don't want to get you in trouble.
No, I don't. No.
Okay,
What
so
happened to me happened to me.
I know, but it's a matter of why were they showing up when it was happening to you, so you had a part in building Minuteman missiles at where this site was.
No, I
so
was a secretary.
Oh well, yeah, but secretaries are equally as important as anybody else, right? Sometimes
Yeah,
even
I
more
think so.
important. But the fact is that you worked in a facility that produced Minuteman missiles. So, and that's what you would call a sensitive facility, and that's where I look to when I find UFO patterns and where they show up, where they don't show up. And so it just caught my interest that from your mother, it was happening, and she never told you, right?
No, she never did. Not
Correct.
until I had my experience. Then she told me that night.
Exactly. And I've had other witnesses basically, and it's generational, where the father told the son, Don't ever talk about this."
Right.
And so it's generational. So it just that was my question, and I just wanted to follow up on that
Oh,
to
sure.
have an
Well, thank you.
understanding. All the pieces of the puzzle have to come together.
Uh-huh.
So, and I'm more of a nuts and bolts kind of guy.
Uh-huh.
I'm not a matrix kind of guy. Forgive my straightforwardness. I'm a nuts and bolts kind of investigator. And so
Uh-huh.
you answered a month long. I've been waiting to be able to ask you what it was that you were involved in, and it pretty much that's what I needed, and
Oh,
I'm
you can
done.
always
So,
just send me an email too, you know.
certainly, certainly, but I'm trying to make an example as an investigator to ask questions,
Well,
as
very
opposed to
good.
just emailing to you. This is a forum where MUFON, we have to ask questions
Yes, we do,
to
or we should.
investigate and not just sit back. And so I just want to encourage anybody that's out there, if you want to become a field investigator, please do it. Because
Mm-hmm.
in my tenure, there was never enough investigators. My first executive role was state director of Nevada, and I was in northern
Oh,
Nevada, and the main group was in southern Nevada in Las Vegas, and I never had enough field investigators to be able to get out and let's find out what it's all about to investigate. So I always that's always been when I was director of public relations was to tell people we need investigators. We
we
need
do
more
need
than just
investigators.
members. It's great to be a member, but if you
Mm-hmm.
have it to give it, man. Be or woman, be an investigator if you can
Ye-
give the time,
Thank
because
you.
that's where it's all going to come from.
It is
And I
the
love the
hard work.
organization because it is an organization. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm always proud to be able
Oh,
to talk about MUFON and if press junkets, all people from different countries, and they just want to know, and to be able to tell them that we're truly an organization, the way that you stated at the beginning of this meeting, and
yes.
to me it's impressive, and
Yeah.
that's what drew me in was the fact that it was an impressive organization where we can get boots on the ground, and I
Mm-hmm.
encourage that so much. So
Yeah. And we do.
I'm gonna shut up. I'm done. I got my question answered. So it just
Thank you,
again, it's
Mark.
pieces of the puzzle. So thank you, and you'll get the next one in email. But looking forward to the next program. So good job,
Okay.
everybody, and hello
Great.
and goodbye, and go ask some questions.
Okay. I agree. So who's next?
I have a question for Richard.
Great.
Okay. My question is, you were talking about dimensional and universes, etc. So my question is, if these ultra terrestrials are visiting our planet from other universes or other dimensions, are there any theories as to why and for what purpose they may be coming to our little blue marble? That's my.
Well, I think I appreciate your question, Arthur, and I think that it would be a mistake to ascribe human uh, or or even modern human thinking or reasoning to the why of it. Um, I I would think that there is a certain amount of scientific curiosity, and also a certain amount of, well, if we can do it, why not? Let's try doing it. Let's see what happens. And uh, I think the why of it. I wish I could answer why of it for you, Arthur, but I really don't know. I think that, um, if you talk to, I have to say that I believe Clifford Stone.
Yeah.
And if you've ever listened to Clifford Stone's stories, what he would say is that we have many different visitors coming from many different civilizations on many different levels of technology.
Mhm.
When, according to Clifford, when he left his UFO crash and retrieval program, they had cataloged over 57 different species that they had encountered in their UFO crash and retrievals. Now, he said that some of these come from our universe, and he said some of them you would not even recognize as a life form unless you knew they were a life form. I don't know what he meant by that, but I'm assuming maybe some of them look like rocks. I don't know. But he also said, and I've heard this from many different sources, that some of our visitors don't come from the universe as we know it. And that was going to lead me up to this. You guys have, if you get a chance, there's a and I think there's really something to this. There's a documentary on Amazon Prime right now called The Friendship Case. And I don't know if any of you have heard about The Friendship Case, but it's actually not just a UFO case. It's actually a series of contacts that took place in Italy in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and apparently is still ongoing with this group of aliens. Now, I'm not saying it's absolutely true. I don't know. But apparently, a lot of the visitors to our planet are actually very human-like and live among us. I'm not saying this is true. Okay, I'm just saying I think we need to open our minds to this. And one of the reasons I say that is because Lou Elizondo said something about this after he met with the Italians, and he said, "I think we need to start thinking more and more about what it means to be human." And this leads back to your question. When these alleged aliens have been asked, "Well, where do you come from?" And they always answer with this sort of, "Well, where do you come from? Do you know where you come from? What part of the universe are you from?" And then relative to our planet, where are you in the universe? And then the answer would be, "Well, do you know what the universe is?" You see what I'm getting at? We assume that there is a planet somewhere that people are coming from, and they just travel back and forth, like they go from New York to Los Angeles on an airplane or something like that. But it may be that these other entities may just simply be coming here because they can, and they may have all sorts of different interests in our planet. They may be interested in us think about this for a second. I think it was, somebody had the analogy that, why would aliens even want to visit us? They may be so advanced, most of these aliens, that they would be so advanced that we would be nothing more than really a pile of ants on the side of the highway. Why would you want to stop and talk to a pile of ants? And my response to that is, well, even people like us who drive on the highway and drive past a pile of ants, we still have something in our culture, in our society, called entomologists.
Yeah.
And all they do is study insects and the behavior of insect colonies. You see what I'm getting at?
Mhm.
And so they're interested in us maybe purely from a historical perspective, or it may be simply, they may be interested, and are probably interested in us for all kinds of reasons, biological and sociological and cultural, and we may be a study in primitive cultures. We may be a study in cultures that are about to destroy themselves.
All right. Well, thank you.
And there's many different species, so there might be a lot of different agendas. And I don't know that we really have any strong substance proof of what they are actually coming for. There's been so many
Yep.
different species that have come, that have been seen, that have been interacted with, but what exactly are they here for? Did that answer your question, Arthur?
Yeah, yeah, it did.
No, no.
Answer the question with a question.
With more questions, yeah. Well, that's
Yeah,
why we're
I just
here.
said, I would just say, Arthur, that it's a mistake to assign any sort of human thinking, because I think that a lot of these beings think on a considerably higher level than we do. And I wanted to get back to that thing that I was talking about, that documentary called The Friendship Case. Now that actually
Yeah.
came out of a couple of books written by a guy named Stefano Breccia, and he is an engineer, or was an engineer, in Italy, and he was actually a friend of Paula Harris's. And he wrote
Oh,
a book
yeah.
called Mass Contacts, and another one, and he wrote another book called Amicizia, or Amicizia. I think that's how it's pronounced in Italian. But these books chronicle widespread contacts with these human-like aliens between members of the Italian society, and just regular people, and these aliens, and they came, and we don't know where they came from, but they had some really strange and awesome technological capabilities. For example, one of the things that they could do is construct bases. They have bases allegedly all over the planet, and these bases, they are huge, and they have them inside of mountains. The one of them was even under the Mediterranean Sea. It was like something like 400 meters high and 600 meters wide and 600 meters long, such that it even had its own weather. And the way they construct these things is it's through a mechanism. And what happens is they just more or less flip a switch, and it opens up a space in the earth. Or not just the earth, but it can open up a space in whatever body they want to do this. And it's a technology that they possess that allows them to make it whatever shape they want. And it causes the soil and everything around it to compress as a space is opened up. And the walls are highly stable. It's really hard to penetrate. And there are no stable entrances and exits. In other words, you can't just walk up to an entrance to one of these things and walk into it, because they're not there. They're created when they go in and out of it. And when they don't need the entrance anymore, it just collapses behind them. When they fly their craft into it, it opens up. They just open up a space. And then when they don't need the base anymore, they turn the mechanism off, and the soil goes back to its original form, and it's not disturbed in any way. Now, they're highly sociologically developed. They believe that there is an actual entity that comes out of friendship and love. They call it Eureka, and they believe that the whole universe is powered by love, if you will. It is the
I believe that.
it is the currency of consciousness. Okay. And so Eureka is an actual entity that they feed by being loving to each other. And they are so highly developed that even their mechanisms are imbued with the inability to hurt others. In other words, their mechanisms cannot be used to harm other beings. Now, they do have conflicts with these people that they call the CTR, which I think are the Greys. And they call them the CTR because which is short for contraries. But even their mechanisms are designed in such a way that they can do no harm, and they would sooner die themselves than hurt another being. That's how highly developed their society is, and that's why we're not invited. They're trying to move us along into this, but their ultimate message is that until we can start loving other persons more than we love ourselves, when we start loving our brothers and our sisters more than we love ourselves, more than when their lives begin to mean more to us than our own lives, that's when they'll let us into the club.
Yeah, much higher consciousness. Absolutely.
Great thought.
Hmm.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it very much.
Well, we've got about
You betcha.
14 more minutes, maybe 13, something like that. Is there any other questions? Don't forget you have to unmute.
Hi, Richard. This is Chris France. Two questions for
Hey,
you.
Chris.
One, your podcasts, I'm really looking forward to being able to listen to those. Do you have live participation? Are they live streamed? Like, can folks call in?
No.
Okay.
Next question.
That makes that easy.
No.
And then,
Actually, no, I don't. I was live streaming them, but I find I'm doing this all myself, and so
Okay.
it's. I find that I can get it done a lot quicker when I interview my guest, and then I do post work on it. So I talk to them early in the week, and then I do a bunch of post work on it, and I develop the, like sometimes my guests might cough or toot, and so I edit all that stuff
TMI.
out. I edit that stuff out, so it's a little bit smoother when it gets on. So there is no live interaction, Christina. I'm sorry.
oh, that's okay. I just wanted to know one way or the other. And then I was looking on the MUFON website while we were chatting and looking for any information about the podcast itself, and I'm not finding anything. Is
Oh.
there a place where upcoming guests are identified for the podcast?
Well, actually, I do that on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
but let me tell you, I do this all myself, and so sometimes I don't get. It ends up more being this was who my guest was kind of a thing, and so
He's like a one-armed
as a-
paper hanger.
well, yeah, more or less, because I am the city attorney in my hometown, and so I'm a pretty busy guy. But I love doing the podcast. It's just I can't. What I really need a staff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Are you hiring?
But I try to get that. I try to get that stuff on there, but I try to keep up, basically, Christina. So I can tell you that I've got some really interesting folks coming up. I'll probably have Stephen Bassett coming up here, and Paula Harris will probably be on, and
Oh, that's
some
great.
other folks. I just had Paul Davids on last week, who's been getting to know better and better over time. So.
Yeah, that's great. And this helps. It gives us an idea of where to watch for upcoming information. So I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
then, of course, I've got to ask the question, with your background in molecular biology, have you been involved in the examination of evidence around any incoming cases that have been particularly interesting? And do you care to share any tidbits if you have?
I'm sorry, Christina, I haven't. My
Ah,
background
darn.
in molecular biology, all the lab work that I did was back when I was in college working on my degree and working in those various laboratories. I can tell you that I did keep up on what happened with Dr. Greer's little 6-inch little guy.
Oh,
I have to tell you, I was around and involved with Dr. Greer at that time when the specimen was obtained and so forth. Now, everybody says, well, it can't be an alien if they proved it was human. It was just some kind of mutation.
Yeah.
No, they didn't. What they showed was that they looked at the mitochondrial DNA, which was from the mother, and they found that this specimen was 6 years old when it passed away, and it looked like from a pretty severe head injury, but it was 90% human. Okay, 90%
Hybrid.
human. Now think about that for a second. Well, possibly. I'm not saying that it is,
Maybe.
but chimpanzees, we share 96% of our DNA with chimpanzees. So this thing was less human than a chimpanzee.
Mhm.
Now, So what I think is and let me say something else about this whole idea that maybe we were placed here. I don't necessarily buy that because we are so biologically intimately tied to our planet. That's why the women's menstrual cycles, they cycle with the moon. It's the same 26-day period. The fluid in our bodies is precisely the same amount of salt in the oceans. We have genes in our bodies that are what they call highly conserved, meaning that that you can find. I was working on this project where the gene that we were looking at was a gene called P68, and it was shared with plants.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, so we have genes in our bodies that are so highly conserved that they go back to a time when we were when there were just a few single-celled organisms on the planet. Now, that is not to say, though, that DNA didn't come from somewhere else. That it didn't necessarily just develop here. I think what we're finding is that there are all kinds of amino acids floating around out there on comets, and not just amino acids, but actual living organisms, diatoms, things like that are floating out there with these little DNA segments in them. But I think that we're at the point now where we realize that a highly developed civilization could really get a grasp, like we are right now, of how to manipulate DNA and how to insert those DNA sequences into other species that might not necessarily be native to our planet. If DNA works the same here as it does everywhere else, then it might be possible. And I think that it does. I think that's one of the commonalities among all living things in the universe, is that we're all sort of structured based upon DNA. And so this DNA is floating out there all over the universe. And back to this little Dr. Greer's little alien, it may be that we're genetically related to everything in the universe somehow, that there are genes out there floating around that we have in common with beings that are from somewhere else. And that's a different idea than the notion that, they were some hairy monkey that they dropped off here, or some shrew-like creature that they just threw off on the planet. That's not what happened. I think what happened was, if there was any sort of interference from a higher intelligence, that higher intelligence actually manipulated the genes that we had in our bodies already. And you can sort of see that possibility with what they call the Big Bang of the brain. Remember that about 50,000 years ago, all of a sudden humans got really, really
I don't remember 50,000
smart
years
out
ago.
of nowhere. Well, you don't remember that?
No, forgot.
But there was what they call the Big Bang of the brain, and
Yeah.
so something fundamentally changed, that changed all of us, that allowed us to be able to experience higher levels of thinking, mathematics, language, writing, all those sorts of things, and it just sort of all happened kind of at the same time. And so I do think that, although we weren't dropped here, I do think there's a possibility that our DNA has been manipulated by some higher intelligence. And I think that this little alien,
Possible.
this little thing of Dr. Greer's, is a lot stranger than they think it is. I think that we've got beings right now living on this planet that are really not as human as you would think they are.
Yeah. So they say.
And completely different from us.
Well, we've got
I think
about
that
5
that
more
little
minutes.
creature may actually be a hybrid.
I just need to throw that out there. Well, not actually 5, maybe about 3. So you want to wrap up that thought? And
Well, I don't have anything further, but I appreciate the question. These are things that I certainly think about all the time, and
yeah,
I do a lot of reading and a lot of studying, and because and that's why I got my degree in molecular biology, because I was interested in life, how life, and that's why I started off in physics, because I was interested in how life started. I started off with this sort of religious perspective as a young kid, and I started to realize, well, it's really not, don't tell me just look at the book. I mean, that doesn't answer my question. And so that's why I got interested in science. And it's only through science that we can answer these questions, but it's also only through having an open mind. Scientists, especially in their own areas, have a tendency to only look where the light is shining, not necessarily because the answer is there, but just because the light is better. And they don't look off in the darkness to find the answers. And I think it's important for us not to get stuck in ways of thinking.
Well, that's very true. You have got an amazing mind, I must say, Richard. This has been wonderful.
I appreciate it, Terry.
Really eye-opening, mind-blowing,
Thank
actually.
you.
I love talking to you. We could go on and on, but we do have to say goodbye tonight, and we won't be back for another month. Well, it's not that long, actually. The next meeting here is going to be December 19th at 7 p.m. Central Time. But could you just share with them again real quickly how to get in touch with you if they'd like to ask you more questions, or how they can see the podcast?
Certainly. Yeah, you can write to me at rwbeckwith001@gmail.com. You can also catch me on the podcast. And as I said, the podcast airs on Sunday night. Our next episode will be the weekend after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
They go for about an hour. I try not to drag my guests out too long, and I try not. I don't talk about stuff that I know. So I've had kind of fun tonight because I don't really ever get to talk about the stuff that I do and that I think about all the time. So on the podcast, I leave that to the guests, and I don't think it's up to me to let everybody know about all the stuff that I know. It's up to me to just sort of facilitate the conversation.
Well, it's certainly been our treat here tonight to have you, Richard. Thank you so very much.
I appreciate it.
And,
Thank you, Terry.
and I never even introduced myself. I am Terry Lynn Keel, and I don't know, I forgot to do that tonight, but I would like to interest everybody in joining us again next month, December 19th, 7 p.m. Central Time. And I've also got a blog that I do at terryling.com, where I share my life experiences with spiritual, extraterrestrial, demonic, angelic, and the paranormal. And I hope you can visit that site. I'm always available for questions that you might have. And you can send me any questions at unitedmufon@gmail.com. And maybe after reading some of those, you might have some questions. But thank you for joining us here tonight. I just want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Got my little pumpkin here, psychedelic pumpkin. And thanks so much to Richard for being with us. Y'all have a happy Thanksgiving. Stay safe. And I hope to see you here next month. Thank you for coming.